I hope everybody had a good Easter. If you celebrate Easter, we don't really celebrate in any real way. Um, we spent the majority of the day outside enjoying the slightly unseasonably warm weather. Our kids played in water, in a water table, and sprayed each other with the hose. And then we all got dressed up and had fancy dinner, which we're thinking at least as long as the quarantine is going, or maybe even beyond that. We're thinking of doing sort of fancy dinner nights once a week, at least, where we all just get dressed up for no reason, just because it's fun to sort of get dressed up. Didn't really get dressed up. I put on a shirt with a, which I took off, but I put on a shirt with a collar and a tie, and it was a lot of fun. My son put on a little shirt, and we had to pin a little bow tie to him, and then Oliver, daughter, got a dress on. So very cute. We had some yummy food. But yeah, our celebration wasn't very much. But one of the things that I did today, which I really enjoyed, which is while the kids were playing, I got to just sit and enjoy reading for a bit, which doesn't happen during the day. It'll happen at night. It doesn't happen during the day. But they were perfectly content to play with each other or by themselves. I was just keeping an eye on them so that neither of them killed each other, which is always fun to do as a parent. That's like 80% of your job. Um, but I started reading this new comic, actually, and I wanted to recommend it because I think it's fantastic. I have a picture, it's on a screen, so I don't know if it's going to show up very well. It is called, oh, hold on, what's the angle? There's the angle. I don't know if that works, or is this the angle? Anyway, it's called Superman Smashes the Klan. It's by Jean Luen Yang, and Guri Hiru is the artist team that draws it. It is a fantastic read. It might be my favorite Superman story, bar none. And there are people who complain about Superman. You think, oh, Superman's too strong, Superman's too unstoppable, he's too perfect, so any story about him is boring. I think that's just a failure of originality and a failure of creativity on the part of writers. If you come up with a bad Superman story, that's your fault because the character is super interesting and can be super interesting. And even if he is not the most dynamic of characters as far as he's a good person, and I feel like the best presentations of Superman are as a pretty a solid good person. There are other people in his life. There are other people to focus on. This story does a fantastic job. It's actually set in the 40s. And it's called Superman Smashes the Klan, so it's Superman versus the Ku Klux Klan. If you're a history buff, you know that the Superman radio show actually had a fair amount of impact on the actual Ku Klux Klan in the first half of the 19th century or the 20th century. Um, Unfortunately, not completely because they're still around. But this book is fantastic. It follows a character named Roberta Lee, who is the daughter of Chinese immigrants moving to Metropolis, and they deal with racism and a version of the Ku Klux Klan that wants to drive them out because they're not white. And Superman, because he's also an alien, although he looks like a white guy, um, helps defend them. And it's very well written. It's not just Roberta's story, it's also Clark's story. Because this version of Superman, without spoiling too much of the plot, because I think it's a fantastic book and I think you should actually absolutely go and read it. The art is fantastic, the story is fantastic. But Clark, this version of Clark is the version of the character that originally was in the comics. Superman did not fly originally. Superman didn't have a lot of the ancillary powers that we know him as having from, Man of Steel, Justice League, the cartoons, all that sort of stuff. He was faster than a locomotive, uh, uh, or stronger than a locomotive, faster than a speeding bullet. He could jump buildings in a single bound. He jumped, and he ran, and he was strong. But that was it. He did not fly. He did not have heat vision. He did not have all these additional powers that we know about Superman having. And this story deals with that. It looks at it, it tries to, without this being necessary, it uses it as a narrative point of there's a reason he could only jump. And he didn't have these other powers. And there's a narrative reason why. And I don't want to spoil it for you. But it's Clark discovering his own origins and his own differences and dealing with his own differences in many way that the young Roberta Lee is dealing with her own differences in a culture that is very racist and still is in a lot of ways. The other great thing about the book, and I find it super interesting, and is that it doesn't every character that it presents is nuanced. It isn't there's the KKK, and then everybody else is perfectly nice. It's like, no, it shows a real snapshot of the world as it is. There's the KKK, and then there are good people that clearly have prejudices, and then there are, decent people that have sort of casual racism, and then there's institutional racism that just sort of pops up everywhere. There's, Roberta is a young girl, and she meets friends, and they're like, oh, and then Roberta impresses them by being super brave, and they're like, oh, I didn't know all Chinese people must be super brave, just like you. And I'm like, the book addresses that. She's like, not all of us, we're not all one thing, just like you aren't all one thing. And I think it's a bit of I don't know if it's being marketed for young adults, but young adults should read it. Any age should read this book. It's very well written. The art is gorgeous, I think. The storylines are really, really good. And it's timely for nowadays. It really is. And it's satisfying sometimes to watch Superman punch a Nazi or punch a Ku Klux Klan guy. It makes me happy to read that and see that on a page. But that's me. Anyway, if you want more comic book suggestions, I got plenty. But for now, that's all I'm going to give you. Right now, it's 7:37 on the West Coast. It is April 12th. I am Chris Morse. This is the Morse Code. I'll see you tomorrow.